The silence in Ethan Montgomery's penthouse was deafening. 48 floors above Manhattan, the city lights twinkled like stars beneath him, but he hardly noticed them anymore. His untouched dinner sat cold on a handcrafted walnut table worth more than most people's cars. The rare Japanese whiskey in his crystal tumbler, $6,000 a bottle, had gone warm. Ethan checked his watch, a limited edition Patek Philippe that cost as much as a suburban house, and sighed. Another evening alone with his wealth. The only sounds were the ticking of an antique grandfather clock and the occasional ping from his phone, another notification about stock prices or business opportunities. Never a text from someone who genuinely cared about his day. At 43, Ethan had amassed enough wealth to last several lifetimes. His tech company had revolutionized cybersecurity, making him a billionaire before 40. People called him brilliant, visionary, intimidating. No one called him just to talk. He stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, pressing his forehead against the cool glass. Below him, millions of lights represented millions of lives, messy, complicated, authentic lives. He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt truly connected to another human being. The women who pursued him wanted the billionaire, not the man. The friends who surrounded him were business associates at best, sycophants at worst. When was the last time someone had challenged him? Contradicted him? Seen past the money to the man underneath? Ethan couldn't remember. He'd built an empire that employed thousands, changed an industry, and made him more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. Yet here he stood, alone on a Thursday night, surrounded by beautiful things that brought him no joy. The charity gala was suffocating. Another night of fake smiles, air kisses, and thinly veiled business propositions disguised as small talk. Ethan had written a check for $2 million to the Children's Hospital Fund, received his obligatory applause, and now stood at the bar watching people who wanted something from him decide how best to approach. His assistant had carefully briefed him on who would be attending, the usual suspects from New York's elite social circle, plus a few new faces deemed important connections. God, he was tired of it all. "Another bourbon, sir?" asked the bartender, a young man in a bow tie who couldn't quite hide his intimidation. "No," Ethan said abruptly. Then, seeing the man's expression fall, "Thank you." He rarely said thank you anymore. When did that happen? When did basic courtesy become optional? His phone buzzed, his head of security, informing him that his car was waiting whenever he was ready to leave. It was only 9 o'clock. He should stay, network, be seen. Instead, he texted back, "Coming now." 15 minutes later, his driver opened the door to his custom Bentley. "Home, Mr. Montgomery?" "No," Ethan said, surprising himself. "Just drive. Somewhere different." The driver hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, sir." As they pulled away from the glittering venue, Ethan loosened his bow tie and leaned back against the leather seat. He felt the familiar emptiness creeping in, the void that no amount of success could fill. On impulse, he leaned forward. "Actually, take me to a bar. A regular bar. Nothing fancy." The driver's eyebrows rose slightly in the rearview mirror, but he nodded. "I know a place downtown, sir. Not your usual scene." "Perfect," Ethan said. "That's exactly what I need." The McNally's pub sign flickered in neon red above a weathered brick building in a part of town Ethan hadn't visited in years. His driver had seemed concerned about leaving him here, but Ethan had insisted. "I'll call when I'm ready," he'd said, ignoring the skeptical look. Now, pushing open the heavy wooden door, he was hit by the smell of beer, faint cigarette smoke, and something oddly comforting, authenticity. The place was dimly lit with worn leather booths, a scratched wooden bar, and a jukebox playing something bluesy in the corner. A few patrons looked up as he entered, but most remained focused on their drinks or conversations. Ethan felt conspicuous in his tuxedo pants and white shirt, but he moved toward the bar anyway, sliding onto a stool at the far end. The bartender, a young woman with her dark hair tied back in a messy bun, was mixing a drink with practiced efficiency. She wore simple black pants and a gray t-shirt with the bar's logo. No makeup that he could see, save for a touch of something on her eyes. She looked tired but focused. She finished serving the other customer before making her way to Ethan, wiping her hands on a small towel tucked into her waistband. "What can I get you?" she asked, her tone neutral. No recognition, no particular interest. Just a question, straightforward and unembellished. "Bourbon," he said automatically. "Neat." She tilted her head slightly. "We don't have the fancy stuff. Jim Beam or Wild Turkey." His usual liquor cost more per bottle than she probably made in a night. "Jim Beam is fine," he said. The bartender, Kara, he'd learn later, set his drink down without ceremony. Ethan reached for it and their fingers brushed briefly. Her hands were slightly rough, working hands. She looked at him directly for the first time and he was struck by her eyes, deep brown with flecks of amber, tired but remarkably present. "You're either slumming it or hiding from something," she said matter-of-factly. "Either way, you're overdressed." Her honesty caught him off guard. Most people treated him with deference or barely concealed opportunism. This woman clearly didn't know who he was or didn't care. Maybe both, he admitted, taking a sip of his bourbon. It burned pleasantly going down. "Rough night?" she asked, though it seemed more like social obligation than genuine interest as she wiped down the bar. "Just the usual superficial nonsense," he replied. "Charity gala. Everyone competing to see who can appear the most generous while networking the hardest." She snorted. Actually snorted. "Yeah, sounds rough, having to decide which worthy cause gets your money while eating $500 plates of food." The criticism was sharp but not malicious. Just honest. Ethan found himself smiling. "When you put it that way, I sound like an ungrateful ass." "If the custom shoe fits," she replied with a shrug, but there was the ghost of a smile on her lips. She moved away to serve another customer, leaving Ethan to contemplate his drink. He watched her work. Efficient movements, genuine smiles for regulars, firm but kind refusals to those who'd had enough. No wasted motion, no pretense. When she returned to check on him, he ordered another bourbon. "You don't actually like bourbon," she observed, placing a fresh glass in front of him. "You drink it because it makes you look serious and important." Ethan blinked. "Excuse me." "Your face," Kara explained, nodding toward his drink. "You winced when you sipped it. And you're nursing it slowly, not enjoying it. So either you're driving, which seems unlikely given the tux and the time of night, or you're drinking what you think you should drink rather than what you like." She leaned against the bar, arms crossed. "So what do you actually like?" The question was simple but startling. What did he like? Not what was expected of someone in his position, not what impressed business associates or dates, but what did he, Ethan Montgomery, actually enjoy drinking? He couldn't remember the last time he'd ordered something just because he wanted it. "I used to like rum and coke," he admitted, feeling oddly vulnerable about such a trivial confession. "College drink." Kara nodded, taking his barely touched bourbon away and efficiently mixing his new drink. She slid it across to him with a raised eyebrow. "One rum and coke for the man in the tux who doesn't need to impress anyone here." He took a sip. It was perfect, the sweetness of the cola balancing the spiced rum, bringing back memories of simpler times before the weight of billions rested on his shoulders. "Better?" she asked. Ethan nodded, feeling something loosen in his chest. "Much better. Thank you." "Kara," she supplied, then added with dry humor, "your bartender and apparently your drink therapist for the evening." "Ethan," he responded, offering his hand. She shook it briefly, her grip firm and warm. "Just Ethan?" she asked, one eyebrow raised skeptically. "No last name? Like Madonna or Cher?" "Just Ethan tonight," he confirmed. Something in her expression suggested she knew he was someone, just not who specifically. But she didn't push. She just nodded and moved away to help another customer, leaving Ethan with his rum and coke and a strange feeling he couldn't quite identify. It took him several minutes to recognize it as relief. Ethan stayed until closing time, nursing just 2 more rum and cokes over the course of 3 hours. He watched Kara work, impressed by her efficiency and the way she handled difficult customers with a firm but fair approach. She checked on him occasionally but didn't hover or attempt to engage him in extended conversation. She treated him like any other customer, a rarity in his world. When she called last orders, he settled his tab, leaving a generous but not ostentatious tip. "Thanks for the drink advice," he said as she handed him his receipt. "Anytime," she replied with a tired smile. "Though if you come back, maybe dress down a bit. You're making the regulars nervous." Ethan laughed, a genuine laugh, not the polite chuckle he reserved for business associates. "I'll keep that in mind." Outside, the night air was cool against his face. He called his driver, who arrived within minutes, clearly having waited nearby. "Did you have a good evening, sir?" the driver asked, holding the door. Ethan paused. "Yes," he said, surprised by the truth of it. "I did." Back in his penthouse, he stood at the window again, looking out at the city. The empty feeling had receded, replaced by something else, curiosity. Kara hadn't fawned over him, hadn't tried to impress him, hadn't wanted anything from him. She'd just been real. When was the last time he'd encountered someone like that? Ethan found himself wondering about her, what her life was like, what her dreams were, what made her laugh genuinely. He'd met countless beautiful women, many far more conventionally attractive than Kara. Yet he couldn't recall the last time he'd been so intrigued by someone. He shook his head at himself. One random encounter at a bar and he was obsessing like a teenager. Ridiculous. He was Ethan Montgomery, tech billionaire and one of the most eligible bachelors in New York. She was a bartender who hadn't even been particularly nice to him. So why couldn't he stop thinking about those amber-flecked eyes and that unflinching honesty? 3 days later, Ethan found himself back at McNally's, this time dressed in jeans and a simple button-down shirt. The bar was busier than his previous visit. A Friday night crowd filled the space with conversation and laughter. Kara was behind the bar again, moving with the same efficient grace. She glanced up as he approached, and he saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes. "Back for more drink therapy?" she asked, wiping her hands on a towel. "Rum and coke." "You remembered," he said, surprised. "I remember what people actually like to drink versus what they order to look important," she replied with a shrug. "Professional hazard." She mixed his drink and set it before him. "No tucks tonight. Moving up in the world." Ethan smiled. "Taking your advice. Trying not to make the regulars nervous." "Thoughtful of you," she said. And he caught the faintest hint of approval in her voice before she moved away to serve another customer. Ethan sipped his drink, content to observe the bar's rhythms. A man at the end of the bar tried repeatedly to get Kara's attention with increasingly aggressive gestures. When she finally approached him, his complaints were loud enough for Ethan to hear. "About damn time. Your service is shit tonight." Kara remained calm. "Sir, I'm serving customers in order. If you can't wait your turn respectfully, you're welcome to try another bar." The man's face darkened. "Do you know how much money I spend here?" "Not enough to buy special treatment," Kara replied evenly. "Now, what can I get you?" The man grumbled but ordered a beer. Ethan watched the exchange with interest. When Kara passed by him later, he commented, "You handled that well." She glanced at the still grumbling customer. "Some people think money should buy them special treatment. I disagree." Her eyes met his, and Ethan felt like she was seeing right through him. Money buys things, not respect. That's earned. Ethan found himself returning to McNally's regularly over the next few weeks. He told himself it was the atmosphere. The unpretentious authenticity was refreshing after the calculated perfection of his usual haunts. But he knew it was Kara that drew him back. She never treated him differently than any other customer, never flirted or sought special attention. Their interactions were brief but increasingly comfortable. He learned small details about her. She was working on a nursing degree, taking classes during the day and bartending at night. She had a younger brother named Mikey who she mentioned occasionally with protective affection. One night, he arrived to find her arguing with an older man in a worn suit who clutched a manila folder. "The payment plan isn't working," the man was saying, his voice apologetic but firm. "The hospital needs a more substantial payment or they'll have to discontinue." "He needs those treatments," Kara interrupted, her voice tight. "I'll figure something out. Can you give me until Friday?" The man hesitated, then nodded. "Friday, but that's the absolute latest, Kara. I'm sorry." After he left, Ethan watched Kara brace herself against the bar for a moment, eyes closed, before straightening and returning to work. Her smile was professional but strained. When she brought Ethan his usual drink, he asked gently, "Everything okay?" "Fine," she said automatically, then corrected herself with a resigned sigh. "Not really, but nothing I can't handle." She hesitated. "My brother has cystic fibrosis. Treatments are expensive even with insurance." She shrugged as if to diminish the weight of her words. "We'll figure it out. We always do." Before Ethan could respond, she was called away to another customer. He sat with his drink, turning over what he'd learned. Her brother was sick. She was working herself to exhaustion to pay for his treatments. No wonder she seemed tired but resilient. That night, he had his assistant research the best CF specialists in the country and arrange for an anonymous donation to the hospital's cystic fibrosis unit, specifically directed to cover treatments for patients experiencing financial hardship. No strings, no recognition. Just help where it was needed. A week passed before Ethan returned to McNally's. Business had required his attention, a potential merger that would strengthen his company's position but meant long days and longer nights. When he finally made it back to the bar, it was relatively quiet, a Tuesday evening with just a handful of patrons. Kara wasn't behind the bar. Instead, a bearded man in his 50s was mixing drinks. "Evening," Ethan said, sliding onto his usual stool. "Rum and coke." "Coming up," the man replied. "You're one of Kara's regulars, right? The quiet guy in the corner." Ethan nodded, surprised to be recognized. "Is she off tonight?" "Called in sick. First time in 3 years." The bartender, Mac, according to his name tag, studied Ethan. "You got a thing for her, don't you?" The directness of the question caught Ethan off guard. "I enjoy her company," he said carefully. Mac snorted. "Yeah, you and half the guys who come in here. But she doesn't give anyone the time of day." He slid Ethan's drink across the bar. "That girl's got too much on her plate to worry about dating." Ethan sipped his drink, considering this. "Her brother's illness?" Mac looked surprised. "She told you about Mikey?" Maybe you're different after all." He leaned on the bar. "Yeah, kid's been sick his whole life. Kara's been taking care of him since their parents died in a car accident 5 years ago. She was 22, just starting nursing school. Had to drop to part-time, pick up this job plus another at a coffee shop mornings. Don't know when she sleeps." Ethan felt a wave of admiration wash over him. While he'd been building his empire, concerned with profit margins and market share, Kara had been fighting daily battles just to keep her family afloat. She's something else, Matt continued. Smart as a whip, tough as nails, and soft as butter where that brother's concerned. He straightened. Anyway, she should be back tomorrow if you want to see her. Ethan didn't return the next day. Instead, he found himself digging deeper into Kara's situation. His private investigator, usually tasked with vetting potential business partners, provided a comprehensive report within hours. Kara Sullivan, 27, parents deceased. Legal guardian to Michael Sullivan, 19, diagnosed with cystic fibrosis at age 3. Worked 60-plus hours weekly between 2 jobs. Maintained a 3.8 GPA in her nursing program despite the workload. No criminal record. No significant debt besides medical bills and a modest student loan. Lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment in Queens. The report included a photograph of Kara and a thin young man with her same eyes, both smiling at what appeared to be his high school graduation. Looking at the image, Ethan felt an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. Here was a woman who had sacrificed everything for someone she loved, who worked herself to exhaustion without complaint, who still managed to pursue her dreams despite overwhelming odds. And she'd looked at him, Ethan Montgomery, billionaire, and seen nothing special. Just another customer who didn't really like bourbon. The realization was humbling. That evening, Ethan made a decision. A few calls to his network of connections, a substantial wire transfer, and it was done. Mikey Sullivan would receive full coverage for his treatments at the best CF center in the country with access to experimental therapies not typically covered by insurance. The donation was structured to appear as a grant from the hospital's foundation, no mention of Ethan or his company. He didn't want gratitude or recognition. He just wanted to help. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something approaching peace as he stood at his penthouse window that night. He had done something genuinely good with no expectation of return. It felt right. 3 days later, Ethan's peaceful feeling was shattered when Kara burst into his office, somehow having made it past his formidable security team. Her eyes blazed with fury as she slapped an envelope onto his desk. "What the hell is this?" she demanded. Ethan stared at her, momentarily speechless. She looked different here, smaller against the backdrop of his minimalist office with its soaring views, but no less fierce. "How did you get in here?" he managed finally. "I told your security team I had an urgent personal matter to discuss with Ethan Montgomery," she replied, arms crossed. "Apparently, you don't get many angry bartenders storming your castle because they actually called up to check if you'd see me. Your assistant recognized my name." Her eyes narrowed. "Funny that." Ethan sighed, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Please, sit down." "I'll stand," she said flatly. "Answer the question. What is this?" She jabbed a finger at the envelope. "Oh." Ethan recognized it. Hospital letterhead. "It looks like a letter from the hospital," he said carefully. "Informing me that my brother's treatments have been fully funded through some miraculous grant he suddenly qualified for," Kara said, her voice dangerously quiet. "A grant that covers experimental treatments that cost more than I make in 5 years." Her eyes burned into his. "The same week that a billionaire tech CEO starts frequenting my bar and asking about my problems. Quite the coincidence." Ethan held her gaze. "I wanted to help," he said simply. "You had no right," she replied, her voice tight with emotion. "You don't get to waltz into my life and throw money at my problems like I'm some charity case. You don't even know me." "You're right," Ethan admitted, rising from his chair. "I don't know you. Not really. But I know you work 2 jobs and go to school and take care of your brother without complaint. I know you're exhausted but never let it affect how you treat people. I know you don't let anyone, rich or poor, disrespect you or others." He moved around his desk, closing some of the distance between them. And I know you're proud. Too proud to accept help that your brother desperately needs. Kara's jaw tightened. Don't you dare make this about Mikey. You think because you have money you have the right to interfere in people's lives? To decide what's best for them? No, Ethan said softly. But I have the means to help and I wanted to. No strings attached. No expectations. There are always strings, she retorted. Always expectations. Men like you don't give something for nothing. Her words stung, but Ethan recognized the fear behind them, the fear of being indebted, of being vulnerable. Cancel it, she demanded. Whatever you did, undo it. We don't need your charity. It's not charity, Ethan argued. It's... what? A gift? From a virtual stranger who happens to be worth billions. Kara shook her head. Don't insult my intelligence. I don't know what you want from me, but I'm not for sale. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. I never thought you were, he said quietly. I just wanted to help someone who deserves a break. I don't need a billionaire savior, Kara said, her voice wavering slightly. I've been taking care of Mikey and myself for years. We'll manage. Ethan saw the tears she was fighting to hold back, the exhaustion etched in the lines around her eyes. At what cost? He asked gently. How long can you keep going like this? Kara's defenses cracked slightly at his question. As long as I have to, she answered, but her voice had lost some of its fire. That's what family does. She sank into the chair she'd previously refused, suddenly looking very small in his vast office. You wouldn't understand. Try me, Ethan said, leaning against his desk. She looked up at him, really looked at him, as if seeing past the expensive suit and the trappings of wealth to the man beneath. My whole life is about keeping Mikey alive and giving him a chance at a normal future, she said finally. Every decision I make, every hour I work, every dollar I earn, it all goes toward that goal. It's exhausting and terrifying, and sometimes I want to scream, but it's my life. My choice. She took a deep breath. When you swooped in with your millions, you took that choice away from me. Made me feel helpless. I hate feeling helpless. Ethan nodded slowly. I understand that better than you might think. He moved to the window, gazing out at the city. Everyone sees the money, the power, the success. They don't see the cost. He turned back to her. I haven't made a real choice in years. Every decision is filtered through advisors, security concerns, shareholder interests. I'm surrounded by people, but completely alone. Kara studied him, her anger gradually giving way to a reluctant understanding. So you're a lonely billionaire. That's supposed to make me feel better about your interference. No, Ethan admitted. But maybe it helps explain why I did it. Meeting someone who saw me as just a person, not a walking bank account or business opportunity, it meant something to me. He hesitated. The grant can't be reversed, it's already in place. But I swear to you there are no strings attached. No expectations. Just help for someone who deserves it. Silence stretched between them as Kara absorbed his words. Finally she spoke. I need to think about this. She stood, smoothing her hands over her jeans. I appreciate what you were trying to do. But next time ask before you change someone's life. Ethan nodded. That's fair. He hesitated. Will you be at McNally's tonight? Kara shook her head. I need some space. Some time to process all this. She walked to the door, then paused. You know, it's ironic. I actually liked you. Just regular guy Ethan in jeans who finally ordered what he really wanted instead of what he thought he should have. Her smile was sad. Turns out that guy was just as much of an illusion as the rest of this. Before Ethan could respond, she was gone. He stood in his office, the faint scent of her perfume, something simple and clean lingering in the air. He'd wanted to help, to make her life easier. Instead, he'd driven her away. The emptiness he'd felt before meeting Kara returned, deeper and more painful than before. That night, he didn't go to McNally's. Instead, he sat alone in his penthouse, nursing a rum and coke that didn't taste nearly as good as when Kara made it. His phone buzzed, another meeting request, another business opportunity. He ignored it. What was the point of all his wealth if he couldn't use it to help the people who deserved it? What was the point of success if it isolated him from genuine human connection? For the first time in years, Ethan Montgomery questioned everything he had built and everything he had become in the process. 2 weeks passed. Ethan buried himself in work, attending meetings, reviewing contracts, making decisions that affected thousands of employees and millions of customers. On the surface, he was the same efficient, brilliant CEO he'd always been. Inside, he felt hollow. He'd respected Kara's request for space, staying away from McNally's despite the constant temptation to return. His assistant noted his darker mood but knew better than to comment. Then came the news that threatened everything, a data breach at his company, potentially exposing millions of users' information. The crisis engulfed him, demanding every ounce of his attention and expertise. For 7 days straight, he barely slept, coordinating teams, mitigating damage, reassuring customers and shareholders. The media circled like sharks, questioning his leadership, speculating about the future of his company. The stock price plummeted. Board members began to whisper about his position. Through it all, Ethan remained focused, determined. This was his company, his vision, his responsibility. He would fix it or go down trying. On the 8th day, the breach was contained, the vulnerability patched. The damage was significant but not catastrophic. His technical team had traced the attack to a sophisticated foreign operation, not a result of negligence on their part. Exhausted but relieved, Ethan finally left the office at midnight, instructing his driver to take him home. As the car pulled away from the building, on impulse, he changed his destination. "Take me to McNally's, please." The bar would be closing soon, but he needed to see her, even if just for a moment, even if she still wanted nothing to do with him. He needed to be in a place where he was just Ethan, not the billionaire CEO fighting for his company's survival. The driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror but made the turn without comment. McNally's was quiet when Ethan arrived, just a few regulars nursing their final drinks. Mac was behind the bar, not Kara. Ethan's heart sank as he approached. "Evening," Mac greeted him. "Haven't seen you in a while." "Been busy," Ethan replied, sliding onto a stool. "Is Kara working tonight?" Mac gave him a long look. "No. She quit about a week ago." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. "Quit? Why?" "Got a full-time position at the hospital as a patient care technician while she finishes her nursing degree," Mac explained. "Better hours, better pay, more relevant to her studies." He paused. "She seems happy, more rested." Relief mingled with disappointment in Ethan's chest. "That's good. I'm glad for her." Mac studied him. "You look like hell, if you don't mind me saying so." Ethan laughed humorlessly. "Been a rough week." "Yeah, I saw the news," Mac replied, surprising Ethan. "Your company got hacked, right? Stock took a dive." Ethan nodded, thrown by Mac's recognition. "You know who I am?" "Figured it out after Kara stormed out of here that day, saying she was going to confront that billionaire bastard Ethan Montgomery. Looked you up." Mac shrugged. "Not that it matters much in here. A customer's a customer." He reached under the bar and produced a folded note. She left this for you. Said you might come back eventually. Ethan took the note with suddenly unsteady hands. Thanks. He ordered a rum and coke, then took his drink to a quiet corner before unfolding the paper. In neat, compact handwriting, Kara had written, "You were right about one thing. Mikey deserves every chance. For his sake, I'm accepting the grant. But don't think this means you've bought anything else. By the way, you're more interesting when you're not trying to solve everyone's problems with your wallet." See. Ethan read the note 3 times, a small smile finally breaking through his exhaustion. She had accepted the help for her brother's sake. It wasn't forgiveness, wasn't an invitation back into her life, but it was something. He finished his drink slowly, savoring the brief moment of peace amid the chaos of his professional life. For the first time in days, the weight on his shoulders felt slightly lighter. The next morning, he returned to the battle of saving his company. The data breach had shaken investor confidence, and competitors were circling, spreading rumors and attempting to poach key clients. Ethan threw himself into the fight with renewed energy. He'd built this company from nothing. He wouldn't let it fall now. Days turned into weeks. Gradually, the crisis abated. The stock price stabilized. Clients who had threatened to leave renewed their contracts, impressed by the transparent and effective response to the breach. Ethan's position seemed secure once more, though the experience had left its mark. Throughout it all, he thought of Kara often, her straightforward honesty, her quiet strength, her unwavering dedication to her brother. He wondered how she was doing, whether she was happier in her new job, whether Mikey was responding well to the advanced treatments. He wanted to check in to see her again, but he remembered her words about respecting her choices. Instead, he channeled his energy into reimagining his company's security protocols, personally leading the team that would ensure such a breach could never happen again. And when the crisis had truly passed, when the company was stronger than before, Ethan made another decision. He established a foundation, separate from his business, separate from his name, dedicated to supporting medical research for rare diseases and helping families struggling with medical costs. It wouldn't bring Kara back into his life, but it might help others like her and Mikey. For now, that would have to be enough. 3 months after the data breach, Ethan's company had not only recovered but emerged stronger. The media, which had been so quick to predict his downfall, now praised his leadership during the crisis. The stock price reached new heights. Board members who had questioned his position now deferred to his judgment. Ethan should have felt vindicated, triumphant. Instead, he felt oddly detached from it all. One Tuesday afternoon, he surprised his assistant by announcing he was taking the rest of the day off, something he hadn't done in years without a scheduled event or trip. He changed from his business suit into jeans and a casual button-down, then dismissed his driver and security detail despite their protests. "Just for a few hours," he insisted. "I need some time to myself." He took the subway, another first in years, watching with interest as no one gave him a second glance. Without the trappings of wealth, he was just another face in the crowd. The anonymity was refreshing. The hospital where Kara now worked was a sprawling complex on the east side. Ethan had no plan beyond wanting to see her, to know she was okay. It was impulsive, potentially unwelcome, but he couldn't help himself. As he approached the main entrance, doubt crept in. What if she was angry at his appearance? What if she thought he was checking up on her, asserting some claim because of the grant? He hesitated, then turned away. He would respect her space, her choices. As he walked back toward the subway, a familiar voice called out behind him. "Ethan?" He turned to find Kara standing a few feet away, dressed in blue scrubs, a lunch bag in one hand. She looked different, more rested, her hair cut shorter, her expression surprised but not angry. "What are you doing here?" she asked, approaching slowly. He began, suddenly feeling foolish. "I wanted to see if you were okay." "It was stupid." "I'm sorry." Kara studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, to his surprise, she nodded toward a small park across from the hospital. "I was just going to have lunch. Want to join me?" Relief flooded through him. "Yes," he said simply. They found a bench in a quiet corner of the park. Kara unwrapped a sandwich from her lunch bag. "Sorry, I don't have enough to share," she said. "I wasn't expecting company." "Don't worry about it," Ethan replied. "I'm not hungry." 19 continued. They sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of the city providing background to their unexpected reunion. "I heard about the data breach," Kara said finally. "Your company was all over the news for weeks." Ethan nodded. "It was intense. We almost lost everything." She glanced at him. "But you didn't. You fixed it." There was a note of admiration in her voice that warmed him. "My team fixed it," he corrected. "I just made sure they had what they needed." Another silence fell between them, more comfortable than the last. "How's the new job?" Ethan asked eventually. Kara's face brightened. "Good. Really good, actually. I'm working in the respiratory unit, which means I get to apply what I'm learning in school immediately. The hours are better, the pay is decent, and—" She hesitated, then continued, "and I get to check in on Mikey during his treatments." She met his eyes directly. "He's responding well to the new therapies. His lung function is up 15%. The simple statement carried enormous weight. 15% meant easier breathing, fewer infections, a longer life expectancy. "I'm glad," Ethan said sincerely. Kara took another bite of her sandwich, chewing thoughtfully before speaking again. "I was angry at you for a long time. For interfering, for thinking you could just throw money at our problems." She shrugged. "I'm still not entirely over it, to be honest. But watching Mikey get better, it's hard to stay angry when I see him breathing easier than he has in years." "I understand why you were angry," Ethan said quietly. "I overstepped. I should have asked first, respected your agency in the situation." He looked out across the park where children played on a small playground. "I've spent so long in a world where money solves problems that I forgot sometimes it creates them too." Kara studied him, her expression softening slightly. "Why did you really come here today, Ethan?" The question hung between them, demanding honesty. Ethan turned to face her directly. "Because I've thought about you every day for 3 months," he admitted. "Because in a world where everyone wants something from me, you're the only person who ever told me no. Who saw through the money and the power to the man underneath, and wasn't particularly impressed by what you found." His honesty seemed to surprise her. She set aside her half-eaten sandwich. "That's not true," she said finally. "I was impressed by the man who ordered what he actually wanted instead of what he thought he should have. The man who listened when I talked about Mikey. The man who watched me work without making me feel like an object or a charity case." She shook her head. "Then that man disappeared and was replaced by a billionaire who thought he could solve my problems without asking what I actually needed." Ethan winced at the truth in her words. "I'd like to find my way back to being that first man," he said softly. "If you'll let me." Kara checked her watch and stood, gathering her lunch things. "I have to get back to work." She hesitated, then added, "I'm off at 8 tonight. There's a coffee shop called Brennan's 2 blocks from here. If you want to talk more, I'll be there at 8:30. Before he could respond, she was walking away, her blue scrubs bright against the green of the park. But this time there was a possibility of return in her departure. Ethan spent the afternoon walking through the city, something he hadn't done in years. Usually, he moved from building to building in private cars with security details isolated from the rhythm and flow of New York. Today, he was just another pedestrian, anonymous and unimportant. The freedom was intoxicating. At precisely 8:25, he arrived at Brennan's, a small, unpretentious coffee shop with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. He ordered a simple black coffee and found a quiet corner table to wait. 5 minutes later, Kara walked in, her hair slightly damp from what he assumed was a quick after-work shower. She'd changed from scrubs into jeans and a simple gray sweater. She spotted him immediately, ordered her own drink, and joined him at the table. "You came," she said, a hint of surprise in her voice. "Did you think I wouldn't?" Ethan asked. Kara shrugged. "I wasn't sure. You have a billion-dollar company to run, after all." There was no bitterness in her tone, just a statement of fact. "The company survived without me for an afternoon," Ethan replied. "It can survive another evening." He hesitated, then added, "I meant what I said earlier. I want to find my way back to being the person you saw at the bar. Not the billionaire. Just me." Kara took a sip of her coffee, studying him over the rim of her cup. "And who is that, exactly? The real Ethan Montgomery?" It was a profound question, one that Ethan had been asking himself for months. "I'm not entirely sure anymore," he admitted. "The money, the power, the responsibility, it changes you. Sometimes I look in the mirror and don't recognize the person looking back." He turned his coffee cup slowly in his hands. "But I know who I want to be. Someone authentic. Someone who makes decisions based on values, not market projections. Someone worthy of—" He stopped himself before saying, "Worthy of you." "Worthy of what?" Kara pressed, catching his unfinished thought. Ethan met her gaze. "Worthy of genuine connection," he said quietly. "With someone who sees me for who I am, not what I own." Understanding flickered in Kara's eyes. For a moment, neither spoke, the weight of his implied meaning hanging between them. Finally, Kara broke the silence. "You know what I thought when I first saw you at the bar? Here's another rich guy slumming it, looking for some authentic experience he can talk about at his next cocktail party." She set her cup down. "But then you kept tea coming back, and you listened. Really listened, not just waited for your turn to talk. That's rarer than you might think." She leaned forward slightly. "Then you went and ruined it by trying to play savior. However well-intentioned, it felt like you were trying to buy my attention. My gratitude. Maybe more." Ethan shook his head. "That wasn't my intention." "Intentions matter less than impact," Kara replied evenly. "But the fact that you understand why I was upset, that matters." She took another sip of her coffee. "So, the real Ethan Montgomery. Tell me about him. Not the company, not the billions. Just the man." The request was simple but profound. When was the last time anyone had asked him about himself, not his business or his wealth? "I grew up in Connecticut," he began hesitantly. "Middle class. Dad was an engineer, Mom taught high school math. They raised me to believe that hard work mattered more than connections or luck." As he spoke, memories surfaced that he hadn't revisited in years: building computers in his parents' garage, the scholarship to MIT, the first small office where he'd launched his company with 3 friends and a dream. Through it all, Kara listened attentively, asking occasional questions that revealed her genuine interest. For the first time in years, Ethan felt seen, not as a billionaire, not as a CEO, but simply as himself. Their coffee grew cold as the conversation flowed easily from Ethan's past to Kara's, her childhood in Queens, her parents' accident, the sudden responsibility of caring for her brother while barely an adult herself. I was terrified, she admitted. 19-year-old me had to become a parent overnight to a 14-year-old with a chronic illness. I had no idea what I was doing. Yet you managed, Ethan observed. More than managed. You kept going to school, kept your brother healthy, built a life. Kara shrugged, but pride flickered briefly in her eyes. You do what you have to do for family. It's not like I had a choice. You always have a choice. Ethan disagreed gently. You chose to step up when many would have crumbled. That's remarkable. A slight blush colored Kara's cheeks at the compliment. Tell me about your brother, Ethan said, sensing her discomfort with praise. What's he like? Her face softened immediately. Mikey's amazing. Brilliant with computers, coding, design, all of it. Despite everything, he's got this lightness about him, this ability to find joy in small things. She smiled. He'd love you, actually. He follows tech news obsessively. When I mentioned your name, he nearly fell out of his chair. Kept saying I should get your autograph. Ethan laughed. I'd like to meet him sometime, if that's okay with you. The words emerged before he could consider their implications, the expression of a desire for continued connection, for entry into her personal life. Kara's expression turned thoughtful. Maybe, she said, neither rejecting nor embracing the possibility. He'd like that, I think. She glanced at her watch and sighed. It's getting late. I should head home, early shift tomorrow. Ethan nodded, disappointing though it was to end their conversation. Can I walk you to the subway? Kara considered, then nodded. I'd like that. Outside, the night air was cool and clear. They walked side by side, close but not touching, their conversation continuing in a comfortable rhythm. At the subway entrance, Kara paused. This is me, she said, gesturing toward the stairs. Ethan nodded, suddenly reluctant to say goodbye. Thank you for tonight, he said simply. For giving me another chance. Kara studied him, her expression serious. I'm not sure what this is between us, Ethan. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't attracted to you. But our worlds are so different. Do they have to be? He asked quietly. She smiled sadly. You arrive in a chauffeur-driven car. I take the subway. You run a billion-dollar company. I'm a nursing student who works in a hospital. She shook her head. Those differences don't disappear just because we enjoy talking to each other over coffee. They don't have to, Ethan insisted. Different doesn't mean incompatible. He took a chance, reaching for her hand. To his surprise and relief, she didn't pull away. All I'm asking for is a chance to see where this might go. No pressure, no expectations. Kara's fingers tightened slightly around his. The billionaire and the bartender, she said with a wry smile. Sounds like a bad romance novel. I prefer the man and the woman who see each other clearly, Ethan replied. Her smile softened. That's a better title. She released his hand and took a step toward the subway entrance. I work the early shift all week, but I'm free Saturday evening. If you want to have dinner. The invitation hung in the air between them, tentative but real. I'd like that, Ethan said, his heart lightening. I'd like that very much. Kara nodded. Text me. You have my number from when you were playing detective. Her tone was teasing rather than accusatory. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Kara. He watched her descend the stairs, remaining until she was out of sight. Only then did he allow himself to smile fully, to feel the unfamiliar but welcome sensation of hope warming his chest. Saturday arrived with unexpected nervousness for Ethan. He'd directed multi-billion-dollar mergers with less anxiety than he felt about dinner with Kara. After much deliberation, he'd suggested a small Italian restaurant in her neighborhood, nice but not ostentatious, quiet enough for conversation. He'd arrived early, asking for a table in the back where they'd have privacy. He'd come alone, dismissing his driver for the evening and taking a taxi instead. When Kara walked in, Ethan momentarily lost his train of thought. She wore a simple blue dress that brought out the amber flecks in her eyes, her hair loose around her shoulders. She spotted him and smiled, making her way to the table. "Hi," she said simply as she sat across from him. "Hi," he replied, suddenly feeling like a teenager on his first date. "You look beautiful." "Thanks," she said, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "You look nice too. No power suit tonight." Ethan glanced down at his casual shirt and blazer. "Not tonight." Their conversation flowed naturally as they ordered and waited for their food. Kara told him about her week at the hospital, about a particularly challenging patient who'd finally turned a corner. Ethan shared stories from the early days of his company, before the money and fame had complicated everything. "Why did you start it?" Kara asked as their entrees arrived. "Your company, I mean. Was it always about the money?" Ethan shook his head. "Not at all. It was about the problem creating security systems that would actually protect people's data in an increasingly vulnerable digital world." His eyes lit up as he explained the technical challenges, the breakthroughs, the vision that had driven him. Kara watched him with genuine interest. "You still love it," she observed. "The work itself, not just the success." "I do," he admitted, "though sometimes I forget that under all the corporate politics and shareholder demands." Their dinner stretched into dessert and coffee, neither wanting the evening to end. When the restaurant began closing around them, they finally left, walking slowly through the quiet neighborhood streets. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," Kara said suddenly as they paused in a small park, sitting side by side on a bench. Ethan considered the question carefully. "I'm terrified of failing," he admitted finally. "Not just the company, but at life, at being a good person. I have all this money, all this power, and sometimes I wonder if I'm using it right, making a difference that matters." He glanced at her. "Your turn." Kara looked up at the night sky, barely visible through the city's light pollution. "I resent my brother sometimes," she said quietly, "just for a moment here and there. Then I hate myself for feeling that way, because none of this is his fault." She shook her head. "I've never said that out loud before." "It doesn't make you a bad person," Ethan said gently. "It makes you human." "I know that intellectually," she replied. "Still feels terrible emotionally." She turned to face him. "Can I ask you something personal?" Ethan nodded. "Of course. All that money, all that success. Are you happy, Ethan?" The question was simple but profound. Ethan considered it seriously. "I was satisfied," he said finally, "proud of what I'd built, but happy." He shook his head. "Not until recently. Not until I started reassessing what actually matters." Their eyes met, understanding passing between them without words. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, Ethan leaned forward. Kara met him halfway, their lips meeting in a kiss that felt like coming home after a long journey. When they separated, Kara's eyes remained closed for a moment longer, as if savoring the sensation. "That was..." she began. "Yeah," Ethan agreed, his voice slightly rough. "It was. The following weeks unfolded in a pattern new to both of them: dinner after Kara's shifts, quiet conversations in small restaurants, long walks through the city. Ethan found himself laughing more, checking his phone less, seeing New York through new eyes. Kara gradually relaxed around him, her initial wariness giving way to genuine affection and trust. One Sunday afternoon, 3 weeks after their first date, she invited him to meet Mikey. Her brother lived in the apartment they shared, though Kara had mentioned he was hoping to move to campus housing at the technical college where he'd recently enrolled. Ethan arrived with no gift. He'd asked if he should bring something, and Kara had firmly said no, but with considerable nervousness. This was important, he knew. A threshold being crossed. Mikey answered the door, tall and thin like his sister, but with the same warm eyes. "Holy crap," he said by way of greeting. "You're really Ethan Montgomery." Kara appeared behind him, gently elbowing her brother aside. "Way to play it cool, Mikey," she said with affectionate exasperation. Mikey grinned, unashamed. "Dude, you're like my hero. Your paper on quantum encryption algorithms changed the whole field." Ethan blinked, surprised. "You read my paper?" "Only like 50 times, Mikey confirmed. "I'm majoring in computer science. Your work is basically required reading." He gestured Ethan inside their apartment, small but neat, with books everywhere and a computer setup that Ethan recognized as surprisingly sophisticated. "Mikey builds custom gaming rigs on the side," Kara explained, catching his look. "It started as a hobby, but now he actually makes decent money from it." "Not Ethan Montgomery money," Mikey quipped, "but enough to help with rent." Lunch was simple, homemade sandwiches and soup, but the conversation was anything but. Mikey's brilliant mind and genuine enthusiasm for technology reminded Ethan of himself at that age, before the business aspects had overwhelmed the pure joy of innovation. By the time Ethan left that evening, he had promised to show Mikey around his company's R&D department and possibly help him secure an internship when he was ready. More importantly, he had glimpsed the deep bond between the siblings, the easy affection, the shared jokes, the unspoken understanding. Watching Kara with her brother, he saw another facet of her strength, not just her determination and work ethic, but her capacity for love and sacrifice. Walking Ethan to the door while Mikey returned to his computer, Kara smiled up at him. "So, you survived family dinner," she teased. "Mikey's amazing," Ethan said sincerely. "You've done an incredible job with him." Kara's expression softened. "He makes it easy. He's a good kid." She hesitated, then added, "He likes you." "A lot." "I like him too," Ethan replied. "And his sister." He pulled her gently into his arms, kissing her softly. "Thank you for today. For letting me into your world." Later that night, in his silent penthouse, Ethan realized something profound had shifted within him. The emptiness that had plagued him for years had receded, replaced by something warm and substantial. His phone buzzed with a text from Kara. "Mikey hasn't stopped talking about you. I think you've made a friend for life." Ethan smiled as he typed his reply. "Good, because I plan to be around for a while, if that's okay with you." Her response came quickly. "More than okay." For the first time in longer than he could remember, Ethan Montgomery, Billionaire CEO, fell asleep with a smile on his face, dreaming not of acquisitions or stock prices, but of a future with a woman who had seen past his wealth to the man beneath, and decided that man was worth knowing. 6 months later, Ethan stood at the window of his penthouse, but he wasn't alone. Kara stood beside him, her head resting comfortably against his shoulder as they looked out at the city lights. "Penny for your thoughts," she murmured, sensing his contemplative mood. Ethan smiled, turning to face her. "I was thinking about the first time I saw you," he admitted, "slinging drinks and side-eye at McNally's." Kara laughed. "God, I was so rude to you." "You were honest," Ethan corrected. It was exactly what I needed. He took her hands in his. You know, that night I walked into that bar, I was the loneliest man in New York, despite having everything money could buy. And now? Kara asked softly. Now I have something money can't buy, Ethan replied. Someone who loves me for who I am, not what I own. Who challenges me, grounds me, makes me a better person. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Kara's eyes widened as he dropped to one knee before her. Kara Sullivan, he said, voice steady despite the thundering of his heart. You walked into my life and refused to be impressed by my money or my power. You demanded that I be authentic, vulnerable, real. You taught me that the most valuable things in life can't be bought, they have to be earned. He opened the box to reveal a ring, elegant but not ostentatious, with a central diamond flanked by smaller sapphires that matched her eyes. I love you. I want to spend my life becoming the man you deserve. Will you marry me? Tears glistened in Kara's eyes as she looked at him, not the billionaire on his knee, but the man she'd come to know and love. Yes, she whispered, voice breaking with emotion. Yes, I'll marry you, Ethan. As he slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, Ethan knew with absolute certainty that of all his achievements, all his acquisitions, winning Kara's heart was by far his greatest accomplishment and the only one that truly mattered. The wedding was small by billionaire standards, just family and close friends gathered at a boutique hotel overlooking Central Park. Mikey, now thriving in his second year of college and working part-time in Ethan's R&D department, served as best man. Kara wore a simple gown that made Ethan's breath catch when she appeared at the end of the aisle. The reception featured both champagne and rum and coke, a detail that made both bride and groom smile at their private joke. As the evening wound down, Ethan and Kara slipped away to a quiet balcony overlooking the park. Happy, Mrs. Montgomery? Ethan asked, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. Deliriously, she confirmed, leaning back against him. Though I'm keeping Sullivan professionally. Dr. Kara Sullivan has a nice ring to it. With Ethan's support, she had accelerated her nursing program and been accepted to medical school, determined to specialize in respiratory medicine to help patients like her brother. It certainly does, Ethan agreed, kissing her temple. I'm so proud of you. Kara turned in his arms to face him. You know, that first night you came into McNally's, I never imagined we'd end up here. Ethan smiled. No? What did you imagine? Honestly? I thought you'd leave a decent tip and I'd never see you again, she admitted with a laugh. Instead, you kept coming back, looking at me like I was some puzzle you couldn't solve. You were, Ethan said softly. The woman who could buy anything except her attention. Kara reached up to touch his face. You never needed to buy it, Ethan. You just needed to earn it. As they rejoined their guests, Ethan reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from a chance encounter at a bar to a love that had transformed them both. The billionaire who once had everything but happiness had finally found the one thing his money couldn't buy. A woman who saw past his wealth to the man beneath, and loved that man completely. And that, he knew, was worth more than all his billions combined. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. What lesson did you take away from Ethan and Kara's journey? Comment below with your thoughts.